When I came home, I heard my fiancée screaming someone's name. When I opened the door, she was on all fours with a guy behind her. She said, "Close the door, we're busy." Instead, I wasn't supposed to be home that Saturday night. The whole team had been sent out to a resort outside the city for a weekend retreat, and the plan was to come back late Sunday afternoon. The only reason I returned early was because Felix, my coworker, had some kind of allergic reaction during dinner and had to be rushed back to the city. Management told the rest of us to head home too. I wasn't even annoyed. Honestly, the idea of a quiet night with Harper sounded perfect. I figured I'd surprise her with takeout from the Thai place she liked, maybe watch something, maybe talk about wedding details. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. My life before that moment felt boring in the safest way. When I walked into the apartment building, I noticed our doormat was crooked. It wasn't a big detail, but it caught my attention because Harper was obsessive about straightening things. She said a clean entryway meant a clean mind. I brushed it off and pushed the door open, expecting to see her reading, or cooking, or maybe even asleep. Instead, I heard her scream. Not a scream of pain, not a scream of fear, a scream of someone who is very occupied in a way that has nothing to do with safety or suffering. And she screamed a name I had never heard in my life. At first, I froze. I actually thought my brain was misfiring, because my first instinct wasn't cheating. It was confusion. The sound didn't match the Harper I knew. The tone didn't match the woman who always insisted our neighbors should think we lived a calm, well-balanced life. Another shout followed, then a loud thud, then a laugh, then a breathless moan that shattered something inside me so completely that the rest of the night blurred into a haze of adrenaline. I walked down the hallway like someone else had taken over my legs. Every step felt like it was happening half a second behind reality. I reached the bedroom door, and for 2 long seconds, I actually stood there thinking maybe I wasn't hearing what I thought I was hearing. Maybe it was a video. Maybe the TV was on. Maybe she had friends over, and they were watching something. Maybe anything except the truth. Then I turned the knob. The door swung open so suddenly that the handle hit the wall. Harper didn't even flinch. She was on all fours on the bed, hair falling over her face, and a guy behind her, sweaty, shirtless, and completely comfortable in a room I paid for. My fiancée turned her head toward me, barely glancing, as if I were a neighbor who had accidentally entered the wrong apartment. She didn't even move to cover herself. She didn't show surprise. She didn't show fear. She just smirked and told me to close the door because they were busy. That was the moment everything in me snapped into something cold and strangely awake. I stepped fully into the room. Harper's eyes widened just a little, almost like she didn't expect me to challenge the script she had prepared in her mind. The guy, later I'd learn his name was Dylan, froze mid-motion. He looked between us like he had been tricked into a performance he no longer wanted to be part of. I didn't yell. I didn't freeze. I didn't leave. Instead, I walked over to the pile of clothes on the floor. Dylan's jeans were right on top, turned inside out. A debit card peeked from the pocket, taped to a folded piece of paper with Harper's handwriting on it. My hands moved before I even thought about it, snatching the jeans up. Dylan lurched forward, but Harper snapped at him to stay put. I pulled the paper free. It was a prepaid card, loaded with far more money than a casual fling would ever justify. My name wasn't on it, and neither was hers, but I knew her handwriting better than my own. Harper suddenly got off the bed, pulling a sheet around her like it mattered. She stormed toward me, not embarrassed, but furious, as if I were violating her privacy inside my own bedroom. She grabbed for the card, but I stepped back instinctively. She yelled at me to give it back, and Dylan stumbled into his clothes, apologizing under his breath. I ignored both of them and looked around the room. Everything felt staged. There were candles burning, something she hated because she didn't trust open flames. Her phone was face down on the nightstand, like someone had deliberately positioned it. A notebook lay open on the dresser, pages filled with colorful ink. Harper wasn't the type to journal. I grabbed the notebook, and she lunged again, screaming that I had no right. The sheet slipped, and she caught it midair, which would have been funny in a different universe. The notebook wasn't a diary. It was a planner. Harper color-coded everything, but these pages weren't about yoga classes or meal prepping or appointments. They were steps, literal phases. Words like phase 1, exit day, soft landing, transition. I didn't understand it, but I understood one thing clearly. I wasn't looking at a spontaneous betrayal. This had been arranged, anticipated, designed. Dylan held his hands up, voice shaking as he said he thought I already knew about the arrangement. Harper barked at him to shut up, but he kept talking because panic tends to make people honest. He said she told him this was a relationship clarity exercise, which sounded so ridiculous I almost laughed. Harper started pacing, grabbing whatever she could reach, trying to gather her things while muttering about how I ruined everything. She didn't try to apologize. She didn't try to hide what happened. She acted like I had violated her plan by walking in earlier than expected. Another piece of paper fell from the planner, a folded note. It contained a simple reminder in her handwriting. Sunday, family brunch. Announced separation. She had scheduled the end of our engagement like it was a work assignment. I walked out of the bedroom with the planner under my arm, the prepaid card in my hand, and something heavy in my chest that felt like melted metal. Harper followed me into the hallway, still yelling, still acting like I was the one who destroyed the evening. Dylan pushed past both of us, mumbling that he didn't want trouble, almost tripping as he fled the apartment. The door slammed behind him, leaving Harper and me in a silence so sharp that every breath scraped. She stared at me, waiting for me to break first, waiting for me to yell or cry or crumble. But I didn't give her that. I told her she could continue whatever phase she was in without me standing around as an audience. Then I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I walked out with her planner, her note, her taped debit card, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't asked for. My legs felt numb as I stepped into the night air. The sky looked like it had been ironed flat, not a star in sight. I stood by my car for a moment, holding everything I had taken, trying to understand what kind of person arranges a betrayal like a corporate restructure. I didn't understand it yet, but I had a feeling this wasn't the worst discovery I was going to make. I drove aimlessly for a while because I didn't know where to go. My apartment no longer felt like mine, and every streetlight I passed made the night look even emptier than the last. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from sadness but from the kind of rage that feels too hot to touch. I pulled into a late-night diner near the main road, mostly because the parking lot was empty and I needed a place where I could sit without explaining anything to anyone. I slid into a booth, opened Harper's planner on the table, and forced myself to read it with a level mind. The pages didn't give me that luxury. They were filled with color-coded steps, with arrows pointing to dates and little notes underlining her intentions. At first glance, it looked like a schedule for someone starting a new job or planning a move. But when I read the details, the truth hit me with a weight that felt impossible to steady. The phases weren't for personal growth. They were for transitioning out of the engagement. The terms were cold, almost corporate. Phase 1, emotional distance. Phase 2, external support. Phase 3, controlled separation. Next to the last step was a name, Mason. I had never heard it before today, yet it appeared throughout the planner with small stars beside it. That's when the next blow landed. There was a lease application printed out and folded between the pages. Not for our apartment. Not for anything near where we lived. It was for a one-bedroom unit across the city, and the applicant was Harper. Her planned move-in date was the first day of the next month. I stared at that date for a long time. She had prepared a new life while still planning our wedding. The prepaid card suddenly made more sense in a way that felt worse. She hadn't just invited some stranger into our bedroom. She had purchased the moment, paid for the exact scenario I walked in on. Someone who intended to break off an engagement gracefully would have had a conversation. Someone who wanted to leave with a spotless reputation needed something Messier that she could blame on me. I shut the planner and leaned back against the booth. My food never came, but I hadn't planned to order anything anyway. What I needed was clarity, and it was starting to form in pieces. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a narrative. One where she was the victim escaping an unstable man. One where she walked away clean. The moment the thought landed, I grabbed my keys and got back into my car. I wasn't going to sit around guessing anymore. If she had planned everything so meticulously, I wanted to know how deep her script went. I drove straight to her workplace. The yoga studio closed at 10, and I knew she sometimes stayed late to tidy up or chat with her coworkers. When I arrived, the lights were still on, and her silver hatchback was parked diagonally near the side door. I walked inside through the front entrance. The scent of essential oils hit me, mixed with the faint hum of an air purifier. Harper stood behind the reception desk, sorting towels. She froze the moment she saw me carrying her planner. She didn't bother pretending she was happy to see me. Instead, she straightened her posture and asked why I was there in a voice practiced to sound concerned. She acted like the bedroom scene had never happened, as if everything had been some awkward misunderstanding I had blown out of proportion. She started explaining things before I even spoke, spinning ideas about boundaries and emotional health. She insisted Dylan was part of a process she believed would reveal the cracks in our relationship. She blamed me for walking in unannounced. She said my presence disrupted the therapeutic environment. She spoke like a person who learned a handful of terms and tried them on as armor. I didn't respond. I simply placed her planner on the desk in front of her and tapped it once. She hesitated. Her face tightened. She knew exactly what I had seen. Before she could speak, her coworker Jenna came out of the studio room carrying a box of mats. She noticed the tension and quietly set the box down. When Harper walked into the back room to compose herself, Jenna approached me. Her voice stayed low, almost like she wasn't sure she should be talking to me. But something in her expression said she was tired of whatever show Harper had been performing around here. She told me Harper had been preparing everyone at work for a breakup for months. She had described me as overly attached, emotionally erratic, and unwilling to let her grow. She told the staff she feared I might react badly when she left, so she was trying to build a support network in advance. As Jenna spoke, something inside me shifted from anger to clarity. Harper wasn't trying to find a graceful exit. She was creating a story in which I played the villain long before I knew the script existed. Jenna also mentioned a name I had already seen in the planner, Mason. She said Harper had been meeting him after work, claiming he was helping her with logistics for her new life. When Jenna saw surprise flash across my face, her eyebrows pulled together. She asked if I knew about any of it. I shook my head. She shook hers slowly, almost with pity. Before Harper returned, I stepped out of the studio and headed straight to the parking lot. The night air felt heavier now, thick with the realization that I was only scratching the surface of her manufactured narrative. When I reached my car, a man leaned against a silver sedan a few rows down. At first, I didn't think he was connected to anything, but when I unlocked my door, he called out my name. I turned, startled, and saw him approaching with an expression that hovered between frustration and disbelief. He introduced himself as Mason. My stomach tightened. The story I thought I partially understood immediately expanded into something wider and far more humiliating. Mason told me he recognized my car from photos Harper had shown him. She said it belonged to her ex, the man she claimed couldn't accept their separation. Mason was shocked when I introduced myself as her fiancé. He pulled out his phone and showed me messages from Harper, all painting her as a woman escaping an oppressive relationship. She told him I was unpredictable, jealous, and prone to emotional turbulence. She said I monitored her. She said I restricted her freedom. She framed herself as a survivor of an exhausting engagement she had finally gained the strength to break away from. The more he revealed, the more something inside me twisted. We stood beside our cars under a flickering light that made every sentence land with a colder sting. Then, in a moment that felt oddly grounding, Mason apologized, not for what he had done, but for what he had been pulled into. He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her anymore. He said he didn't like being used to hurt other people, and he didn't appreciate being lied to about something as serious as an engagement. I realized then that Harper hadn't just tangled me in a plan. She had pulled in anyone willing to believe a story blessed with confidence and charm. When I got into my car again, I placed her planner on the passenger seat, watching the pages shift slightly as the car settled. Everything I thought I understood about the betrayal was once again too small. The act in the bedroom wasn't a mistake or a spark of temptation. It was the final step in a performance she had been rehearsing for months. She didn't want the truth to surface during the breakup. She wanted a reason she could point to. She wanted witnesses she could persuade. She wanted me to be the one people questioned, not her. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I knew something important. Her plan only worked if I reacted exactly the way she predicted, and I wasn't going to give her that. The next morning felt hollow in a way my body didn't immediately understand. I woke up at my coworker Felix's spare room, where he insisted I stay after I told him I couldn't return home. The silence of the place pressed hard on me. Normally, my mornings were full of Harper's routines. The blender, the early alarms, the scent of herbal sprays she believed purified the air. Without them, everything felt off balance. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding Harper's planner. It lay open on the same page I had studied at the diner the night before. The handwriting looked almost cheerful with its neat colors and loops, so disconnected from the reality she created. Sunday brunch. Announced separation. It was supposed to be tomorrow. I had the option to ignore it, pack my things, and let her confront her own mess alone. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that she had shaped a story far beyond the bedroom incident. She had built a bridge of lies months long, and the brunch was supposed to be her grand moment of control. She would stand in front of her family, portray herself as someone escaping a toxic relationship, and use the staged affair as the dramatic final act. I wasn't going to let her do that. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to let her rewrite my life into something I didn't recognize. By noon, my decision was set. I'd go to the brunch before she arrived. I'd bring the planner. I'd bring the prepaid card. I'd bring the truth she had worked so hard to bury beneath performance and manipulation. Felix offered to come with me, but I declined. This wasn't about a crowd. It was about ending something on ground she no longer controlled. The restaurant was a cozy place her parents loved. Big windows, plants along every wall, waiters who remembered orders and made small talk about weather and traffic. I arrived early, walked inside, and found her family already seated. Her mother lifted her head the moment she saw me. eyes widening with warm surprise that quickly sharpened into concern. Her father, a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, gestured for me to sit. He asked why I had arrived before Harper. His tone carried suspicion, but it wasn't directed at me. Something told me he had noticed shifts in her behavior long before I had. I didn't stretch the moment. I placed the prepaid card on the table and set the planner beside it. Her mother looked confused until she recognized her daughter's handwriting. When I opened the planner to the pages filled with color-coded phases, her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her father leaned closer, scanning each note slowly, his face tightening. I explained everything without embellishment, what I heard when I came home, what I saw in the bedroom, the staged arrangement with Dylan, the plan to provoke a breakup she could publicly weaponize. I didn't yell. I didn't dramatize. I laid out the facts exactly as they had happened. Her mother's expression shifted from shock to heartbreak. Her father, on the other hand, took on the kind of stillness that usually appeared before a storm. He asked about Dylan, who he was, how he got involved. I told him everything I knew, including the fact that Harper had paid him. I expected disbelief or anger at me for daring to accuse their daughter. But all I saw was recognition that something had been wrong for a long time. Her mother whispered that Harper had been distant, irritable, defensive about strange things. She admitted Harper had mentioned fears about me, but the way she said it made clear she had never believed them. She had simply been confused by the shift in Harper's personality, the sudden coldness, the secretiveness. While they processed the truth, I felt a strange wave of relief. Not joy, not vindication, just relief that the nightmare had not been mine alone to carry. Then the door opened. Harper walked in wearing a light dress, hair styled in soft waves, looking like someone prepared to deliver a speech crafted in advance. She saw me first, then the planner, then her parents' faces. The blood drained from her cheeks. She approached cautiously, as if the table were a cliff. Her mother asked her to sit. Her father's stare was sharp and unwavering. Harper hesitated, then slipped into the seat beside me, though she didn't look at me once. Her father asked her to explain the planner. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then muttered something about personal growth phases. Her voice shook. Her mother leaned forward and asked why she had written a breakup announcement into a family brunch. Harper's eyes darted everywhere except the pages in front of her. She started talking quickly, her sentences tumbling into each other as she painted herself into the corner she had built. She claimed I had become emotionally draining. She claimed she had been forced to seek creative clarity exercises to decide if the relationship was healthy. She insisted Dylan was an experienced facilitator, which sounded rehearsed and hollow. Her father cut through her rambling and asked if she paid a man to sleep with her so she could stage a breakup scene. Harper finally looked at me. The room around us fell completely still. She blinked, and for a moment I thought she might try to apologize or at least soften. Instead, she accused me of twisting facts. She claimed I misunderstood. She said I was controlling the narrative to make her look unstable. She reached for the planner, but her father pulled it away before she touched it. Right then, the restaurant door swung open again. A figure stepped inside, scanning the room. My breath caught. It was Mason. He wasn't dressed for brunch. He looked like he had sprinted from his car. His gaze locked onto Harper, then shifted to me. He walked straight to the table without hesitation. The waiters didn't even have time to intercept him. Harper's face drained of whatever color she had left. Mason introduced himself to her parents. He explained, in calm but trembling words, that Harper had told him she was single and escaping a suffocating relationship. He admitted he didn't know she was engaged until yesterday. He said she had promised to move in with him within the month. He revealed she used me, my stability, my income, my schedule, to buy time until she could comfortably transition into her new life. Her mother broke into tears. Her father's jaw tightened. Harper's voice cracked into a shrill pitch as she accused Mason of misunderstanding everything. She said he was obsessed with her. She said he misread her intentions. She said he was trying to sabotage her future. Then the restaurant door opened once more. This time it was Dylan. He looked tense, pale, and shaken. He walked straight toward our table, ignoring the waiter attempting to stop him. He stood beside us, hands trembling. Harper covered her face with her hands. Dylan apologized to me first. Then he apologized to everyone else at the table. He explained he didn't know she was engaged. He revealed she threatened him the night before, telling him to stay consistent with her version of the story because she was preparing for a major personal transition. He confessed she paid him to treat me indifferently if I ever walked in, because she needed evidence that the relationship had reached a breaking point. He said she wanted people to think I had forced her into exploring new limits. The air in the restaurant felt thick enough to choke on. Guests stared. The staff froze in place. Harper looked around like she was sinking in water she never learned to swim in. Her father finally spoke. His voice didn't rise. It didn't break. It was steady, controlled, and final. He told her to leave the restaurant. He told her she needed to take responsibility for what she had done, not hide behind stories. He told her she had crossed a line he never imagined she would cross. Harper stood up, shaking, muttering that everyone was dramatic and unfair. She tried to make eye contact with me, but I didn't give her the moment she searched for. She stormed out of the restaurant, her voice rising as she pushed the door open so hard the bell rattled. For a long time, none of us spoke. Then her mother whispered that she didn't understand how things had reached this point. Her father apologized to me on behalf of their family. Mason left quietly. Dylan sat down at an empty table, head in his hands, as if he had barely held himself together long enough to confess. I walked outside into the cold air, feeling the weight of everything but not collapsing under it. The plan she had built so meticulously had crumbled not because of anything I did, but because lies can't survive when too many people are forced to stand in the same room. And now the story she tried to write for me had burned away. But the consequences for her had only begun. When I left the restaurant, the cold air felt sharp enough to sting. I stood beside my car for a moment, letting the morning noise wash over me. People hurried along the sidewalks, cars slid through intersections, and the world moved like nothing had exploded inside that brunch room. I expected to feel triumphant or vindicated or something cinematic. Instead, I felt an exhaustion so deep I wasn't sure I could drive. Harper's car wasn't in the lot, which meant she had fled as fast as possible. I imagined her spiraling through explanations in her mind, trying to decide which version of herself she should become next. She always performed for the people around her, shifting tones and expressions to match whatever outcome she wanted. That ability worked as long as she controlled the environment. Today she didn't. I got into my car and sat there until my hands steadied. I wasn't angry anymore. That phase burned out somewhere between Dylan's confession and Mason's heartbreak. What I felt now was a detachment that didn't belong to the man I'd been before all this. It was colder, clearer, quieter. I didn't go home. Home wasn't a place I wanted to revisit yet. I went back to Felix's apartment, where he opened the door wearing a confused expression until he saw the planner in my hand. He didn't ask questions. He just stepped aside and let me in. He was one of those friends who understood that silence sometimes meant more than conversation. I collapsed onto his couch while he brought me a glass of water. He asked if I wanted to talk. I said no. He said he understood. He sat across from me anyway, just present enough to make the room feel stable. My phone buzzed around noon. For missed calls. 5, 10. The name on every notification was Harper. The messages were long, frantic paragraphs. The first few were defensive. The next were panicked. The last ones were pleading. I didn't open any of them. By evening, she shifted tactics and began contacting Felix. Then Jenna. Then, apparently, even Mason. She cycled through desperation, denial, anger, and attempts at persuasion. She told Jenna she had been manipulated. She told Mason I had exaggerated. She told Felix she feared for her reputation because of me. She wanted someone, anyone, to hand her a fresh script she could perform her way out of. What she didn't realize was that too many people now knew the truth. Her performance had no stage left. The next morning, Felix and I picked up breakfast, and for the first time since everything began, I ate without forcing myself. My body finally remembered what normal hunger felt like. When I finished, I opened my phone and read her messages. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted closure. Her texts started with explanations about emotional growth and boundaries. Then she blamed stress. Then she blamed childhood experiences. Then she blamed me for coming home early. Then she blamed Dylan for speaking. Then Mason. Then her parents. Then the world. Finally, she returned to me, writing that she loved me and needed my support more than ever. It was a cycle without any responsibility in it. I didn't answer. Not then. Not later. By noon, Harper sent one more message. I'm coming over. We need to talk. Except I wasn't at home, and I didn't want to be anywhere near her. That decision ended up protecting me from a new disaster. She went to the apartment anyway. She used her key. She walked inside and realized I wasn't there. She called again, voice trembling. Then she called my mother. Then Felix again. Then, apparently, even the landlord. When no one responded, she did what I knew she would do eventually. She drove to her parents' house. An hour later, her father called me. His tone sounded strained but steady. He told me she had arrived in complete disarray, crying, insisting that everything was a misunderstanding. She tried to portray Mason as unstable, Dylan as a liar, Jenna as jealous, and me as emotionally chaotic. Her father said she kept contradicting herself every few minutes. She pleaded with them to take her side, but they asked her to rest for a while and speak honestly later. She left their house abruptly when they refused to validate her story. I thanked him for calling. He apologized again. I told him he didn't owe me anything. That night, I finally returned home. When I walked through the doorway, everything looked exactly the same, yet every object felt foreign. The bed was stripped. The dresser drawers hung slightly open. A few candles remained burned to their base on the nightstand from the stage scene she had orchestrated. The planner sat on the coffee table where I dropped it before brunch. I gathered my clothes first, then my important documents, then some sentimental things from the shelves. I wasn't packing angrily. I was sorting through a space that had been used as a stage set. The life I thought I lived had been replaced by a life she constructed, and I needed to clear my part of it out. I stayed long enough to pack 4 bags. Then I called a locksmith. The man asked if the lock was damaged. I said no. He asked if I had a hostile roommate. I said something more complicated than that. He changed the locks within an hour. When he left, the silence in the apartment felt different. Not heavy, not broken, more like a blank slate. 2 days passed before I heard from any of the key players again. The first call came from Jenna. She told me the studio had suspended Harper, not for cheating or personal drama, but because she had been using staff members for emotional manipulation and involving clients in inappropriate conversations. The owners were considering a full termination because one of the clients, Ruth, a regular, reported that Harper had asked for money to support a transition. The prepaid card I found in Dylan's pocket suddenly made even darker sense. She had taken funds from someone who trusted her professionally. The next message came from Mason. He said he blocked Harper the moment she tried to blame him for everything at brunch. He apologized again and said he hoped I wouldn't think poorly of him. I told him I didn't. He had been lied to just like I had. He said he needed time to process everything. I understood that more than he realized. Later that afternoon, Dylan sent a short message as well. He said he planned to provide a signed statement to Harper's employer if they needed one. He didn't want trouble for himself, but he also didn't want her to destroy anyone else's life through false narratives. I thanked him. He didn't owe me anything, yet he chose to correct his part of the mess. By the end of the week, Harper had lost her job. Her parents had asked her to take space from the family until she sought help. Mason disappeared from her life. Dylan cut all contact. Jenna blocked her after too many erratic late-night calls. And me? I moved into a small temporary place near Felix's building. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months. The silence didn't harm me anymore. It healed. One evening, as I unpacked my things in the new apartment, a final message came from Harper. Not long, not chaotic, not manipulative. It was shockingly simple. She wrote that she never meant for things to unravel to this extent, and she didn't know how to rebuild anything. She said she hoped I healed from all of it. The message carried no request, no plea for forgiveness, no justification, just a quiet surrender written in one paragraph. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not in anger, simply because the story was finished. When I stepped onto the balcony of my new place, breathing in the night air, I realized something that felt strangely profound. I hadn't walked away triumphant or victorious. I hadn't destroyed anyone. I hadn't played her game. I had let her unravel on her own terms, under her own actions, in front of the people she chose to deceive. And now the pieces of my life belonged to me again.